Some habits we implement day to day, and others we use them for long-term financial planning. So whether it's a short-term benefit or long-term, we need rules to live by. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to share with you 5 easy rules that will help protect your retirement savings. All right, so I want to begin talking about these 5 easy money habits with this particular habit, and that is creating a budget and living by it. Now, I found some interesting statements and really some quotes about budgeting that I thought could be helpful to kind of set the stage for the importance of a budget. One author said this. He said, a budget allows you to prioritize those things that matter most and ruthlessly cut out those things that really don't matter. Another author said this, being on a budget doesn't mean you always have to live a super frugal lifestyle. What it simply means is you're being intentional with your spending. And so I think when we talk about budgeting, especially for people that have not done that, it's nothing that really has to be burdensome. It's just something that is really necessary in our retirement years. Okay, be intentional with your spending. Someone also said that trying to manage your finances without a budget is like walking around wearing a blindfold. None of us would do that. Why? Because it's dangerous. They're definitely going to end in disaster. It's just simply not safe. And the same thing is true, folks. We need a budget, really pre-retirement, but also in our retirement years for sure. Okay, because we don't walk around really in financial blindness. Okay, now let's also look at a couple aspects here when we talk about creating a budget, and that's this. Some of you watching this may not yet be retired. You're still pre-retirement, maybe 2 years away, 5 years away. And so here's a real common philosophy of money use pre-retirement. Call this the 50-30-20 rule. And the 50% here would say this, of all the money you have after tax, so we're talking about post-tax money, 50% of that should go to our needs, those things we need. This is going to be housing and insurance and food, utilities, those kind of things that we need. And then 30% of our money should be really designated for things that we want. Okay, this is our lifestyle. How do we want to live? These are things that we don't really have to have, but we'd like to have them as part of our life. And that's very important as well. And then 20% of our money ought to be saved. And so if you're pre-retirement, I think these are pretty good rules to live by. Now, many of you watching this are already retired, and so really what's our goal in retirement? Well, there's a couple of them. Number one, post-retirement, we want to definitely live within our means. Why? Because you don't want to go back to work. Sometimes as I'm out and about living life, and especially retail place, and I'll see people that are clearly retirement age, and they're still working. And I know sometimes they went back to work because they wanted something to do, and I know that happens, but sadly sometimes people go back to work because they overspent. They did not live within their means, and that's very sad. Also, what you can do is live below your means. Nothing wrong with that. We don't have to spend every dollar that we have available. And so really, these should be our goals, at least to live within and even live below our means. All right, so as we talk about a budget, I want to draw your attention to really some keywords. Number one, what you have to do is you have to identify your income, and you're going to have to identify your expenses. I know this is simply common sense, but identify those. Put those on a sheet of paper. We can't hope that there's going to be enough money to live on. We need to know that. And so we're going to identify those items. Now, what we encourage as financial planners is this. We want people to not only tell us what their living expenses are, but also what their lifestyle expenses are. Living is essential. That's our housing and our food, insurance, and those kind of things. That's what we need. That's very necessary. But you also want a certain lifestyle. That's the reason you worked all your life, so that you can enjoy a certain lifestyle in retirement. And of course, that's going to usually cost some money as well. So we bring both of those expenses into our equations. We put together our budget. And then the second thing we're going to do once we've identified these items is we're going to start tracking our spending. Okay? You got to track what you're spending, and there has to be some means of doing that. A lot of times, so what we do in our family, we pay everything with a credit card. We like to collect the points. We then can track where our money is going. So whatever your method is, you want to be sure to track that spending. You want to monitor where the money is going. A few years ago, I had a heart issue. Ended up not being anything, but the doctor prescribed a heart monitor, and I actually had to wear that thing for 30 days. And every time there was a little flutter or something happened, I had to push a button. They go back to see what was going on at that time, what happened with my heart. And that's what we're talking about here. You're going to track your spending so you can monitor to see is there a place where you may be overspending or a place where you thought you may be spending, you're not. So you can make some kind of adjustments. But you've got to track your spending and pay attention to all the dollars that are going out. And then lastly, of course, we want to review. You got to review on a regular basis because things change. I know as we age, it seems like we're spending more money on healthcare expenses. And so when things adjust, we're going to have to adjust our budget, but be sure to review them accordingly. Now, here's what I want to talk about real quickly as I wrap this particular one up, and that's this, and that is if you find yourself overspending. And sometimes that happens with people. There's a great quote that I like, and here's what it says. So when we find ourselves overspending, meaning we're tracking our money and we realize we're spending too much, you need to get this concept, and that is you need to practice living with less. Now, doesn't mean practice living with nothing, but practice living with less. And I'm just going to share a couple hints with you. I think these are great suggestions, and then we're going to move on to habit number 2. But number 1, buy secondhand whenever you can. There are a lot of things that we can buy secondhand that are almost like brand new. So buy secondhand when you can. Number 2, eat out less often. And by the way, I like to eat out. My wife and I enjoy that time together. But sometimes eating out is not really the best thing for our budget, especially if we're doing it too much. They say right now that the average meal that is eaten at home costs $4.25. The average meal eaten out is $16. And so when you do the math on that and we're eating out too much, it's very easy to be spending $1,000 extra a month just in eating out. So that's one way you can actually practice by living less, eat out less often. Also, you can prep your meals in advance. That is a more cost-effective way. You can do bulk cooking and then, freeze things. One author said this, I thought it was a great idea. They said, go to your pantry once a week and prepare a meal just for the things that are extra in the pantry, or extra that would be in the refrigerator. That's, I thought was a good idea. Opt for generic. In other words, buy store brands whenever you can. Normally, they're just as good as the brand name, but much cheaper. And then I like this one, buy for life. Buy for life. Sometimes we buy cheap things that don't last, and then we just got to replace them. Or it'd be better to buy for life, buy things that are high quality, that are going to last a much longer time. And then when you shop, especially when you go grocery shopping, I thought these were kind of unique ideas. Be sure to go with a full list, a list of things, so there's not a lot of impulsive buying in the store. Go with coupons in your hand, and also go with a full belly. I don't know about you, I'm dangerous whenever I go shopping at the grocery store and I'm hungry. So again, you can save money if you shop properly. Sell things or return things that you don't need or do not use. If they're just going to sit, try to sell them if you can. Adjust your thermostat, downsize if possible, and then also reshop your insurance. That happens to be our business, but reshop it, because especially property casualty, homeowners, auto policies, those can tend to go up over time, and so reshop those. Same thing, of course, with Medicare plans as well. Okay, enough of that. I think you understand the point of how important it is for us, number 1, to have a budget. Hey, if you found this video helpful and you want to see more Medicare information just like it, then go below, right below the video, and you can give us the thumbs up as well as subscribe to our channel. And every time I put a new video, which is about 2 every week, you'll be notified of that video, and others just like you who need this vital information will get it as well. All right, that brings us to habit number 2, and that is to minimize your debt, especially high interest debt, which of course would be credit cards. Now, they say that right now the average person retiring has about $70,000 in debt. All right, and so what we have to do is we have to be sure we're minimizing that and doing all we can to pay it off. And so I think some of the things that we have to be mindful of is to be sure that we understand all the terms of whatever loan we have or whatever credit card we have. We have to understand the interest is being charged and the terms really of borrowing money from these different lenders. Now, if you happen to do have a credit card that you use, I think the main goal should be, and this is what my wife and I do, we pay that thing off every month. In fact, if I would come to a month, hasn't happened, but if I came to a month where I could not pay it off, I would absolutely cut it up. Because that tells me I'm putting things on there that I really cannot afford to buy. So again, if you have a credit card, if you use it to do points and all those kind of things, that's a fine thing, but you better have the money to pay that off, if not, cut it up. Now, if you can't pay it in full, for whatever reason, something happens, maybe an emergency or whatever, then you certainly want to be sure that you are paying more than the minimum. People who pay minimum, of course, are going to find themselves in disastrous kind of situations. So always discipline yourself to pay more. Now, if you happen to be someone that does have some debt right now, then what I think is the smartest thing to do is start working on paying off those cards that have the highest amount of interest. Start paying those off, because it's taken a lot from your budget. Now, if you have some that are really high and you can't pay them off, then what I would do if you have multiple credit card debts, then I'd just be paying off some of the ones that have smaller balances, and then that way you can free that up and take that money and apply that to that credit card that has the highest amount of interest. So the whole point is this: you always want to make sure that you're minimizing debt, because what happens if you're not controlling that debt, it can put a very much a negative impact upon your retirement savings. Okay, we just don't want money going to the bank, going to the credit card companies, because that's totally a waste of money if we're having to pay interest. Now, I happen to have a home loan. I don't mind that. I think sometimes people even have that in retirement, but I'm not retired yet. But I plan to have my home paid off before I go into retirement. So if you can do that, do everything possible. And remember, every time that you put $1 additional principal amount, then that's what you earned on that money. So right now I have a 3.99% interest on my home loan. And so every time I put an extra $1 in, I just made 4% on that dollar. And so it's very wise to try to pay that off so you can go into retirement debt free. And if you don't do that, be sure that you manage your money in such a way that you can make it your goal to be debt free. All right, let's talk about then habit number 3. This habit is also critical, and that is to review and to rebalance investment portfolios annually. And if you don't do it annually, you at least ought to do it regularly, to be paying attention to the importance of be sure that you're reviewing and rebalancing. So I found something I thought would be helpful, and I want to read to you this real quickly. This author of Financial Planner, says this. She says, over time, your portfolio could become too heavily invested in a particular type of an asset or in a specific industry. And so the point is we invest. Sometimes we find things that we really like and we continue to invest in those. And because of that, our portfolios can get out of balance. She says this: when this happens, you could be exposed to either too much or too little risk. This is dangerous for any investor, but especially for people in or nearing retirement who may not have time to recover from losses or wait for the market to rebound in the event of a crash. So what's he saying? Be sure that you're rebalancing that portfolio, because as we save for 20, 30, 40 years, sometimes our portfolios can get out of balance. Things that we like, industries that we focused on. But if we have too many eggs in that particular basket and there's some type of market impact, that really could hurt our retirement savings. So here's what he says: rebalancing your portfolio involves shifting around your investments so you have the appropriate asset allocation based on your age and your risk tolerance. You should get in the habit of doing this at least once per year before retirement so you don't jeopardize the chances of your savings supporting you. All right, so very good advice. So be sure that you're paying attention to how your assets are allocated and rebalance them and review them regularly to make those necessary adjustments. Now, the 4th easy money habit that I want to draw your attention to and really spend some time teaching about, because it's often overlooked, and that's this: to be wise with account withdrawals. To be wise with account withdrawals. Why is that? Well, because as we go into retirement years, most people are taking money out of their traditional IRAs, maybe a 401k, 403b plan. We have to. That's how we make ends meet. But we have to make sure that the timing of our withdrawals is done accurately and really appropriately. Because if we start liquidating money, taking distributions, whenever the market is negative and we actually find ourselves in a bear market, or maybe even for a few years of a bear market, that can rapidly deteriorate an investment account. So that's why we're saying you got to be wise about your withdrawals. Okay. Again, I want to read just a couple things to you about this, because I think it's often overlooked. All right. And so let me just share this with you. And this author says this. He says, we face plenty of risk when investing for retirement. Markets crash, or at least adjust. Inflation can eat into our returns. You might even worry about outliving your savings. But there's one big retirement risk that gets very little attention, and that is called sequence of returns risk. Sequence of returns risk is the risk that market declines in early retirement years paired with ongoing withdrawals could significantly reduce the longevity of portfolio. And so as we take those distributions, if markets are declining, what is going to happen is we're going to erode that portfolio more quickly than we want to. He goes on to say this: timing is everything. And in retirement, early market declines, particularly if they are paired with rising inflation, can have a huge effect on how long a nest egg can sustain a retiree. All right, so once an investor retires and then starts taking distributions from their investment portfolio, annual market returns become critically important. Significant market losses in the early years of retirement can shorten the longevity of portfolio. We just saw that. And this is the risk that's posed by sequence of returns. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go to a chart. I want to explain to you this sequence of returns risk that we run to make sure that you're mindful of it so you can make very wise withdrawals. And so what we're going to look at is a couple different charts here, and hopefully you can see this. If you're looking on your phone, I'll try to at least kind of specify what I'm talking about. But the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this. We have an account balance, we're saying, and in this particular scenario, we're saying a portfolio has $100,000 in it. So we're going to look at two scenarios. We're calling those A and B. But notice in this particular scenario is this. We have $100,000 in the account. We're not going to put any new money in, and we're not going to draw any money out, okay, for 5 years. And so as we look at what happens to this portfolio, no money in, no money out. But what I want to draw your attention to is sequence of returns has to do with when the market's up and when the market's down. And you're going to notice here, year one, in scenario number one, the market went up 25%, year two, 15%, year three went up 5%. So we had three bull markets in a row. And then we have two bear markets. We lose 5% one year, and then we lose 20% the next year. All right, and so we're going to see what this portfolio is going to look like with this kind of market activity. Now, let's look at scenario number B. Same thing, $100,000, and all we're doing is we're reversing the market. Now we're saying that we lose initially. We start off with our investment portfolio in a bear market, not a bull market, and we lose 20%, 5%, and now we hit the bulls. We get 5, 15, and 25. So identical returns, but the years are different. We just swapped them around. So we have $100,000. What's this portfolio going to look like? Well, it's going to be the same. There's no change whatsoever. The market did the same thing, though it was reversed because we put no money in, took no money out. Our cumulative returns on this were still just 2.78%, not a whole lot, but that account grew, again, about $14,700 in either one of those scenarios. Why? Because we didn't take any money out, didn't put any money in. So that is scenario number one. That's going to be identical. Hey, if you're finding this video to be helpful and you would like to learn more about Medicare, you'll notice up here in the right-hand corner, there's an eye. And if you'll click on that eye, it's going to take you to a 20-minute workshop. I see people make mistakes all the time, and we don't want that to happen to you. And that's why we're giving you free access to this workshop. So go ahead, click the link, and learn more about Medicare. All right, so that's the first scenario. Now let's look at the second scenario. And again, this is an account that we start off with $100,000, two different situations. We have the same market volatility, same market activity in this scenario. We had 3 years that were up. We had bull markets and then two bear markets. Up here, those two bear markets are first, and we have bull markets after that. Again, same returns in the market as we had in chart number one. We just simply reversed them in these two scenarios. But what's different with this situation is now we're actually going to put $10,000 in. In other words, we're going to add that $10,000 to the account every year. Again, we're not taking any money out. So how does the sequence of returns affect this account? All right, so $10,000 going in, and over that period of time, we start $100,000. And what we're going to have in this account is we're going to have a 7.64% growth. And so what happened was that account grew to 158.9. Over here, it grew larger, 182. Even though we had those two bear market situations early on, we had three bulls, and so that ended up working out better for us. Before, when we had no money, it was the same. But now we're adding money, and we're going to see this account grew more. All right? And so again, that's the sequence of returns with $10,000 going in. Let me just show you one more and show you how this is going to be impacted really the opposite way. In this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to withdraw $10,000. And so our money starts at $100,000. We're not going to put new money in. The market's doing its thing, but we are taking $10,000 out at the first of every year. Again, on this scenario, 3 ups, 2 downs, 2 downs, 3 ups. What's going to happen? Now watch what happens. Just the opposite. Over here, when we were putting money in, this account grew more than this account. But now that we're taking money out, it is just the opposite. So those early years where we had bull markets hurt us substantially more when we're taking the distributions. And so in that scenario, this is when we'd say, wow, we don't be sure that maybe when the market's down, we're getting our money from other sources rather than some market account that is declining. Because look at the difference. This account lost 4%, almost 5%, that one over 12%. So our $100,000 now has reduced to $70,000. This one, $46,000 still left in that account. So you can see why I'm saying it's critical that we make sure that we're wise and we're thinking all these things through and we're preparing, because markets are going to go down. And the last thing we want to have to do is take on those amounts of distributions from our accounts systematically if that market is declining. Now, there was one financial planner years ago who actually tracked the market for a straight 50 years, and he came up with a principle called the 4% rule. And what he said, even when markets go up and markets go down, as long as a person is not taking any more the first year than 4%, and then they adjust for inflation after that, their money should not run out. That account actually should sustain them for 30 years, and sometimes even go beyond that. But the point is, we cannot take out too much of our money at any time, but we especially have to be very cautious when we're pulling money out when that market is declining. That is the sequence of returns risk. Now let's go to number 5. Now this particular habit has all to do with making sure that you familiarize yourself, be educated about the different government programs and policies, because these are going to impact you in your retirement years. Number 1, taxes. We have to be very strategic about our taxes. Most of you watching this right now probably have money in a 401k. Maybe have money in a 403b or some kind of an SPAP. You may have a Roth IRA. The whole point is we invest throughout our working years. You may have a traditional IRA. Right? And so other than the Roth, all these aspects here, we put that money in tax deductible. It grows tax exempt, but it's not always tax exempt. There's going to come a point in time when you're going to have to actually pay taxes, regular income taxes, as you start taking those distributions. Even if you don't need the money, we still have to take required minimum distributions at a certain age. And so the whole point is you have to be sensitive to taxes and what's your view on future taxes. And that's why a lot of people today are actually doing Roth conversions. They're going ahead and paying taxes on that so they can convert that to an investment where, as long as they keep it in there long enough, there will be no taxes at all on the returns of that money or even the principal of that money. And so a very smart strategic way to be planning for future taxes. All right. And so here, really there's two philosophies. Some people say, well, I'd rather save tax deferred and have the harvest taxed. Others say, I'd rather do a Roth conversion, pay the taxes now, so I'm just paying taxes on the seed. Either way, you're going to pay the taxes. I'm not saying there's right or wrong. I'm just saying if you're going to have this habit in retirement, you have to be paying attention to taxes because they are going to have an impact on your retirement funds. The second thing you'll be paying attention to is Social Security. And the main thing here I just want to mention is this. We know that if we'll go to full retirement age, and anyone born 1960 after has a full retirement age of 67. If we're born in 1959, it'd be 66 and 10 months. 1958, 66 and 8 months. But we all have a full retirement age. And if we take our Social Security benefits before our full retirement age, we actually lose 0.5% per month, which is what? 6% on an annual basis. And if a person does not need that money, then they at least ought to wait to their full retirement age before they take Social Security, because that reduction is a permanent reduction. All right, now we can also grow beyond full retirement age. And so someone could, if their full retirement age is 67, they could actually wait until age 70 and they would have grown their Social Security account a full 24%. So if they were eligible for, let's say, $2,000 a month, now they're going to get what? $2,480. And that $480, if they live long enough, will really be a blessing in their later retirement years. So the point is, be sure to really strategize about the right time to take your Social Security benefits. The other thing you got to be mindful of, if you take Social Security before full retirement age, you can only make so much money, right? That's called the earnings test. And so if you make above that earnings test amount in your wages, then they're going to reduce your Social Security benefit. And sure, you'll get that money back, but it's prorated over time. It's not going to be lump sum. And so if you're above the earnings test, I think it's always wise to wait to take Social Security until you retire, because once we've reached our full retirement age, now this earnings test is going to be eliminated. We don't have to deal with that whatsoever. So the whole point is make sure you understand how these programs work. And then number 3, I want to talk about Medicare. And the main thing about Medicare, and I'm in the business, of course, but Medicare, a lot of people think that Medicare is free, and it's not. Now, Medicare A has a 0 premium, but Medicare B has a cost to it. And this year, that cost is $174.70 a month. Plus, some people may choose to get a supplemental plan, a G or an N plan, plus we have to have a drug plan, right? And so the whole point is you have to, in your budget, prepare for the cost of Medicare. It is a very good value still, but it's still going to be an expense for you. And so sometimes people decide to go ahead and work a little bit longer because their insurance plan at work is better than their Medicare option, okay? So be sure that you're mindful of this. Now, second thing I'd be mindful of is this Part B premium is based upon your income, and it's called your modified adjusted gross income. And by the way, that is line 11 which is your AGI plus line 2A on your tax return, which is tax-exempt interest. So they take line 11 and 2A, and that becomes your modified adjusted gross income, and that number is what determines how much your Part B premium is going to be. And so if you're single and above $103,000 this year, your Part B premium is going to have an additional charge to it called an IRMA. It's an acronym, IRMAA. It's a surcharge added to your Part B as well as your Part D premiums. So a single above $103,000, a couple above $206,000 is going to pay more. And so my whole point is, as you do your financial planning, and you may be doing Roth conversions, you may be doing, selling certain things, just know that that income and those aspects of your withdrawals are going to affect how much money you're going to pay for your Part B as well as for your Part D. So if we can keep those numbers below the thresholds, then we're not going to be assessed those IRMAs, okay? And so you got to be mindful of these things. Just one more, and really this is a bonus. I told you I'd give you 5. Let me just quickly close with this one. I think this too will be helpful. And here it is, number 6, and really the bonus, and that's this: implement the 24-hour rule. And really, this is something that even if you're not retired, you ought to be implementing. And this rule, I think, can really save people lots of money and a lot of headache really from impulsive spending. So let me just read just a couple things about the 24-hour rule. I hope you'll implement this in your life. And basically what this is all about is being sure that you're reflecting upon your purchasing decisions, especially those that are going to be above a certain dollar amount. Sometimes people say if it's going to be above $500 or it's above $1,000 or even above $100, then we're going to implement the 24-hour rule. Okay, so here's why we would do this. The 24-hour rule has to do with getting into the habit of slowing down and reflecting before making an impulse buy that can be a big money saver. Some questions that we should ask ourselves as we implement this rule is this item a want or a need? So we're not going to buy right now. We're going to go back home. We're going to think about, talk about it. And is this item a want or a need? Can I afford it without sacrificing something more important? And again, if you have put on a credit card, then you really cannot afford it. All right, unless you can pay that off at the end of the month. And will this bring long-term value and satisfaction? All right. Now, the 24-hour rule means this. It means that when you come across something that you're tempted to buy immediately, give yourself a cooling off period of 24 hours. And again, maybe $50 purchase, no big deal, $100 maybe in your budget, or even $500, but set a limit as to if it reaches a certain amount, we are not going to buy it impulsively. We're going to let this decision brew a little bit. We're going to think it through. And the purpose of the 24-hour rule is to create a space between the initial impulse and the actual purchase. Often that initial excitement and that compulsion to buy can fade away after this period of time. By waiting, you give yourself a chance to reconsider the purchase in a more neutral state of mind rather than emotion and impulsive. During those 24 hours, you can also do this. Take the time to research the item's features of it, read reviews about the product, compare prices, and consider if it aligns truly with your needs and your budget. Okay, so these are the 5 things plus the bonus that I know if you will implement them into your life and make these a habit, make these a rule for yourself and a practice that you regularly use, I know this will help you to protect your retirement savings.